The neural implant hummed to life at 347 hours, and Sergeant Marcus Cole woke up in love. Not the gradual kind. The instantaneous, overwhelming, all-consuming kind that made his chest ache and his thoughts scatter like startled birds. He sat up in his bunk, gasping, hands pressed against his temples as foreign emotions cascaded through his mind. Somewhere in the distance, across the void of space, he could feel horror. The Empress. His Empress. "What the hell did they do to me?" he whispered. The answer came from his own memory, surgically implanted alongside the feelings. Operation Bridgekeeper. Humanity's last desperate gambit in the 30-year war against the Velkhari Empire. One human soldier, neurologically bonded to the young Empress, programmed to love her unconditionally. A living symbol of peace. A puppet. Marcus had been chosen for his service record, 15 years of combat, 3 Purple Hearts, a reputation for unwavering loyalty. What the brass hadn't mentioned was that they'd turn his brain into a diplomatic tool. The transport ship Meridian dropped out of FTL 3 days later, delivering him to the Velkhari homeworld like a gift-wrapped package. Marcus stood in the shuttle bay, wearing dress blues that felt like a costume, his mind swimming with manufactured affection for a being he'd never met. The Velkhari delegation waited on the landing platform, tall, angular figures with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed soft amber. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, and Marcus's combat instincts screamed warnings that his implant immediately suppressed. She is not a threat. She is your purpose. He hated how right it felt. The Empress stood apart from her guards, smaller than he'd expected. The intelligence briefings had described Velkhari royalty as towering, imperious figures. Empress Lyra'vel looked barely 5 feet tall, her frame almost delicate beneath ceremonial robes of deep purple. She couldn't have been more than the Velkhari equivalent of 20 years old, young for a ruler, thrust onto the throne by the same war that had taken Marcus's entire squad at Proxima 7. Her amber eyes found his, and the implant, Zhang. Marcus dropped to one knee before he could stop himself, the programmed response overriding his dignity. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am yours." The words tasted like ash and honey simultaneously. Empress Lyra'vel tilted her head, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly soft, carrying none of the imperious command he'd expected. "Rise, human. I did not ask for you to kneel." Marcus stood, confused. The implant urged him to prostrate himself further, to declare his devotion, but something in her tone made him hesitate. "You are the bonded one," she continued, switching to flawless English. "The one they programmed." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Do you feel it? The artificial love?" The question was so direct, so clinical, that it cut through the haze of manufactured emotion. Marcus found himself answering honestly. "Yes. I feel like I'd die for you. I feel like you're the most important thing in the universe. And I know," he paused, struggling against the implant's influence, "I know none of it is real." Something flickered in those amber eyes. Surprise? Respect? "Interesting," she murmured. "They told me you would be simpler, a devoted servant incapable of questioning his devotion." "I'm a soldier, Your Majesty. Not a simpleton." The guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons, but Lyra'vel raised one slender hand. "Peace. He speaks truth, which is more than I can say for most who address me." She turned, robes swirling. "Come, Sergeant Cole. Let me show you your cage." Marcus followed, the implant flooding him with joy at her proximity, while his soldier's mind catalogued exits, guard positions, and potential weapons. He was a man at war with himself, programmed to love, trained to survive, and increasingly uncertain which instinct would win. His quarters were adjacent to the Empress's chambers, luxurious by military standards, claustrophobic by any other measure. Marcus stood at the window, staring out at the alien cityscape of crystalline spires and bioluminescent gardens, and tried to sort his real thoughts from the implanted ones. He loved her. That was undeniable. But did he choose to love her? Could he ever? A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. When he opened it, Empress Lyra'vel stood alone in the corridor, stripped of her ceremonial robes, and wearing simple gray garments that made her look less like royalty and more like the young woman she actually was. "May I enter, Sergeant? There are things we should discuss without an audience." The implant screamed yes, anything, everything, but Marcus managed to respond with something approaching military professionalism. "Course, Your Majesty." She walked past him, examining his sparse quarters with curious eyes. "You may call me Lyra when we are alone. The titles grow tiresome." "That wouldn't be appropriate. I am asking you to be inappropriate." She turned to face him. Do you know why I accepted this arrangement, Sergeant? Why I allowed your people to send me a man programmed to love me, to secure the peace treaty, to demonstrate humanity's commitment to no Daudua. She cut him off. I accepted because I wanted to understand. Understand what? What it feels like to be loved, even artificially. Her voice carried a weight of loneliness that the implant couldn't manufacture. Valkyrie rulers are not permitted attachments. We are symbols, not people. I have been Empress since I was 14 of your years, and in that time, not one person has looked at me with anything but fear, ambition, or calculation. She met his eyes. Until you. You look at me with love, Sergeant Cole. Programmed love, perhaps. But love nonetheless. I wanted to know how that felt, even if it's false. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that might have been real, beneath the artificial adoration. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For being a lie they sent you. Lyra'vel smiled, and it was the saddest expression he'd ever seen. We are both lies, Sergeant. I am a symbol pretending to be a ruler. You are a weapon pretending to be a lover. Perhaps that makes us well matched. She left without another word, and Marcus spent the night staring at the ceiling, fighting a war inside his own mind between what he was programmed to feel and what he was beginning to feel on his own. He wasn't sure which terrified him more. 3 months into his assignment, Marcus discovered that the implant couldn't account for everything. It made him love Lyra. That was absolute. But it couldn't make him respect her, trust her, or actually know her. Those things apparently had to be earned the old-fashioned way. And Lyra, despite her position, was determined to earn them. You're holding the blade wrong, Marcus said, watching her fumble with the combat knife. You'll slice your own fingers off before you hit a target. They were in the private training room adjacent to her chambers, a space she'd cleared of guards specifically for these sessions. 3 weeks ago, she demanded he teach her self-defense. 3 weeks ago, he tried to refuse. You cannot deny her, the implant had whispered. Her safety is your purpose. But it was Lyra herself who convinced him, not the programming. My guards were killed once, she'd told him, her voice flat, during the coup attempt when I was 16. I hid in a closet while assassins searched for me. I survived because they were incompetent, not because I was capable. I will not hide again. Now she gripped the knife properly, muscle memory beginning to form after countless repetitions. Better, Marcus admitted. Now show me the disarm sequence. Lyra moved through the motions. Block, twist, control the wrist, extract a weapon. Her form was improving daily, her natural Valkyrie reflexes compensating for her lack of training. When she finished, she wasn't even breathing hard. Again? She asked. Rest first. You're pushing too hard. She set down the knife and grabbed a hydration pack, settling onto a bench with a grace that seemed innate to her species. Marcus remained standing, maintaining the professional distance that was becoming increasingly difficult to preserve. You're troubled, Lyra observed. More than usual. It's nothing. You're a poor liar for someone who lives a lie. Marcus sighed. She'd developed an irritating habit of seeing through him, or maybe the bond worked both ways, letting her sense his emotional state. I received a message from command, he admitted. Routine check-in. They wanted to confirm the implant was functioning properly. And they asked me to provide detailed reports on your daily activities, security protocols, and psychological state. Lyra's expression didn't change, but something in her posture hardened. Ah, so you are a spy as well as a symbol. I told them no. That got a reaction, a slight widening of her amber eyes. You refused an order? It wasn't an order. It was a request. And Marcus struggled with the words, with the conflicting loyalties tearing at him. I'm here to protect you, not to betray you. Whatever this is between us, whatever I programmed to feel, I won't use it as an excuse to sell you out. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Do you know what my advisors tell me, Marcus? They say I should have you killed. That you're a Trojan horse, a weapon waiting to activate. They say no human can truly be loyal to Valkyrie, especially not one whose loyalty is chemically enforced. Marcus felt cold. And what do you tell them? I tell them that you've had 100 opportunities to harm me, and you've spent those opportunities teaching me to protect myself instead. She stood, closing the distance between them. I tell them that programmed love is still love, and that I would rather trust a man forced to care for me than one who pretends to by choice. Lyra, I am not finished. She reached up, her cool fingers touching his jaw, the first time she'd initiated physical contact. I tell them that I am beginning to trust you, Marcus Cole, Not because of the implant, because of who you are beneath it. The implant flooded him with euphoria at her touch, but beneath it, something else stirred. Something that felt like genuine warmth. I don't know who I am beneath it, he admitted. I can't tell where the programming ends and I begin. Then we will find out together. She withdrew her hand, and the loss of contact felt like a wound. Same time tomorrow? She asked, picking up her knife again. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. The assassination attempt came 2 weeks later. Marcus was in the antechamber when he heard the explosion. A muffled crump that shook the walls and sent his combat instincts into overdrive. He was moving before conscious thought, the implant screaming protect her, in perfect harmony with his training. The Empress's chamber door was buckled inward, smoke pouring through the gap. Inside, chaos. 2 guards down, a third fighting hand-to-hand with a figure in black, and Lyra backed against the far wall, blood running from a cut on her forehead. Marcus didn't think. He drew sidearm and put 2 rounds into the assassin's center mass, then spun to cover the breach point, a hole blown through the exterior wall where a window had been. 2 more figures in black were climbing through. Down! Marcus shouted, and Lyra dropped without hesitation, the weeks of training paying off. His next shots took the first climber in the throat. The second got a hand on him before he could re-aim, and then it was close combat, ugly and brutal in the smoke-filled room. Velkari were stronger than humans. Faster too. But Marcus had been killing for 15 years, and desperation made him savage. He broke the assassin's neck with a technique that would have made his drill instructor proud, then turned to find Lyra standing over the first assassin's body with a knife in her hand and cold fury in her eyes. "There will be more," she said. "This was just the advance team. How do you know?" "Because I recognize the marks on their weapons. This is House Vortan. They don't send teams of 3. As if to prove her point, alarms began wailing throughout the palace. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Safe room." "Now." "There is no safe room. Vortan has people in my guard. They'll know every protocol. Then we improvise." He pulled her toward the breach, toward the chaos outside. If they couldn't hide, they'd have to run. "Marcus." Lyra's voice stopped him at the edge. "If we don't survive this, we'll survive. But if we don't, I want you to know that what I feel for you isn't artificial. The bond works both ways, but I stopped needing it months ago." The implant screamed joy, but beneath it, Marcus felt something different, something that was entirely his own. "Same," he said roughly. "Now move." They went out through the breach together, into the fire and the smoke and the uncertainty. And for the first time since the implant had activated, Marcus didn't question whether his feelings were real. They were fighting for their lives. Nothing was more real than that. They survived the night in the servants' tunnels beneath the palace, ancient passages that predated the current structure, unknown to all but the oldest retainers. Lyra had learned of them from her grandmother's journals, a secret passed down through generations of paranoid royalty. "Smart woman, your grandmother," Marcus muttered, checking their perimeter for the 100th time. She survived 4 assassination attempts and 2 civil wars. Lyra sat with her back against the stone wall. The knife Marcus had given her clutched in one hand. She always said that palaces make excellent prisons and terrible fortresses. She was right. The coup had been more extensive than either of them anticipated. House Vortan hadn't just targeted the Empress. They'd moved against loyal noble houses simultaneously, seizing control of military installations and communication centers. By morning, Lyra's empire was fracturing. "I should surrender," she said quietly. "End this before more people die." Marcus turned to face her. "That's not an option." "Why?" "Because your programming won't allow it? Because surrendering won't save anyone. Vortan doesn't want you as a prisoner, Lyra. They want you dead. Your existence legitimizes resistance. As long as you're alive, they can't claim the throne. Then I should die quickly and spare my people a prolonged conflict." The implant babbled at that, flooding Marcus with such intense protective fury that he had to grip the wall too. Stay upright. But beneath the manufactured response, his own anger burned just as hot. "That's coward talk." Lyra's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? You heard me. Running and hiding until someone else solves the problem isn't strategy. It's surrender with extra steps. Your grandmother survived 4 assassination attempts. Did she do it by offering her throat to the knife? My grandmother had armies. So do you. They're just scattered right now." Marcus crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Lyra, I've been fighting losing battles my whole career. Proxima 7, the Kepler offensive, the retreat from Sigma 4 Chastigio. You know what I learned? Wars aren't won by whoever has the most troops. They're won by whoever refuses to quit." "That sounds like human propaganda." "Maybe. But it's also true." He reached out, taking her free hand in his. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, I'm with you. Not because they programmed me to be, because I choose to be. Lyra stared at their joined hands. How can you know that? How can either of us know what's programming and what's choice? We can't. But I've been thinking about it, and I realized something. Marcus squeezed her fingers gently. The implant makes me love you. It doesn't make me respect you, trust you, or want to follow you. It doesn't make me believe in you. Those things I came to on my own. Through manipulation. Through proximity. Through watching you train until your hands bled because you never wanted to hide in a closet again. Through seeing you argue with your advisors for hours about grain distribution during the drought. Through listening to you learn English swear words so you could curse at me properly during combat drills. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Your language has very creative profanity. It does. And you've picked it up remarkably well. Marcus released her hand and stood. The point is, love doesn't equal loyalty. I've loved things that weren't worth following. And I've followed things I didn't love. What I feel for you is both, and I don't give a damn whether it started with a computer chip or not. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. There's a loyalist stronghold 3 days' journey from here. General Kethvar commands it. She served my grandmother and despises House Vortan. If we can reach her, we have a chance. 3 days through hostile territory with no supplies and a bounty on your head. Yes. Marcus smiled. A real smile, not the manufactured warmth of the implant. I've done worse. Let's move. They traveled by night, hiding during the day in whatever shelter they could find. Caves, abandoned structures, once in the hollow trunk of a massive bioluminescent tree. Lyra learned to move silently, to read terrain for threats, to sleep in shifts. Marcus learned that Valkyrie could see in near-total darkness, that they could survive on minimal water, and that Lyra sang softly to herself when she thought he wasn't listening. The songs were in her native language, mournful and beautiful. He asked about them on the second night, as they sheltered in a burned-out farmhouse. Mourning hymns, Lyra explained, for the dead. My people believe that the newly fallen can hear us for 7 days after death, so we sing to ease their passage. Who are you singing for? Everyone. Her voice was hollow. The guards who died protecting me. The servants who were killed when the palace fell. The soldiers on both sides who are dying right now, because noble houses can't resolve their differences without blood. She paused. Your squad mates. From Proxima 7. Marcus felt his throat tighten. How do you know about them? I read your file. Before you arrived. I wanted to understand the man they were sending me. She looked at him in the darkness, her amber eyes catching the faint bioluminescence from outside. You were the only survivor. 17 soldiers dead, and you carried the wounded 7 kilometers under fire before reinforcements arrived. The wounded died anyway. Yeah. You blamed yourself. I was the ranking NCO. They were my responsibility. And now I'm your responsibility. Lyra moved closer, close enough that he could feel the cool radiation of her skin. Do you resent it? Being assigned to protect another person you might lose? The question cut deeper than she probably intended. Marcus had spent 3 months not thinking about it, not acknowledging that the implant had given him something to lose again, that Lyra had become the vulnerable point in armor he'd spent years building. Yes, he admitted. Every day. And no, because he struggled with words that felt inadequate. Because losing you would destroy me, but having you in my life makes me feel alive for the first time since Proxima. I'd rather risk the pain than go back to being numb. Lyra reached up, her fingers tracing the scar on his jaw. A souvenir from Sigma 4. My grandmother wrote about this in her journals. She said that love was the only wound worth receiving. That all other injuries heal into strength, but love heals into more love, making us simultaneously weaker and stronger. Smart woman. She was. I wish you could have met her. Marcus caught her hand, holding it against his face. Tell me about her. We've got hours until we can move again. So Lyra talked, and Marcus listened, and somewhere in the darkness of that burned-out farmhouse, the last distinction between programmed love and chosen love finally dissolved. It didn't matter how it started. It only mattered that it was real. They reached General Kethvar's stronghold at dawn on the 3rd day, exhausted and filthy and alive. The general, a scarred veteran who looked like she'd been fighting since before Marcus was born, received them in her command center with an expression that mixed relief and strategic calculation. Your Majesty, we feared the worst. The worst may still come, General. What's the situation? The situation, as Kethvar explained, was precarious, but not hopeless. Voran controlled the capital and most of the central provinces, but the outer territories remained contested. Several noble houses were waiting to see who would win before committing. The loyalist forces were outmatched, but not outnumbered. We can fight, Kethvar concluded, but we cannot fight a prolonged war. We need a decisive victory within the next month, or attrition will finish us. Then we need to give the undecided houses a reason to choose sides, Lyra said, something that makes victory seem possible. A symbolic victory. Something dramatic. Kethvar's eyes slid to Marcus. Perhaps something involving the human alliance. Marcus understood immediately. You want me to call in support? A human fleet in our space would terrify Vortown. They've built their entire campaign around the premise that the peace treaty died with the old regime. If humanity demonstrates continued support for the Empress, it could end the war before it really begins, Lyra finished. Marcus, can you contact your people? He could. The emergency beacon built into his implant had a range that could reach the nearest human outpost. But using it meant revealing his position, activating tracking systems, and admitting to command that the diplomatic mission had failed spectacularly. It also meant giving humanity leverage over Lyra's empire. A fleet showing up to save the Empress would create debts, political debts that would take generations to repay. I can call them, Marcus said carefully. But I need you to understand what that means. Right now, you're a sovereign ruler fighting for your throne. The moment human ships enter your space, you become a client state. Protected, but not independent. Is that what you want? Lyra met his eyes, and he saw her weighing the options. Pride against survival, sovereignty against existence. What would you do? She asked. If it were your people, I'd make the call. Pride doesn't matter if you're dead. But you'd hate it. Yeah, I would. Lyra nodded slowly, then turned to Kethvar. Prepare our forces. We attack in 3 days with or without human support. She looked back at Marcus. I won't become a client state. If we win as Valkyrie. If we lose, we won't lose, Marcus said. You don't know that. No. But I know you. And I know that you didn't survive 4 nights in hostile territory just to give up at the finish line. Something passed between them. Understanding, trust, something that might have been love if either of them had been willing to name it. 3 days, Lyra said finally. Then, we end this. Marcus nodded. He didn't make the call. Some choices had to be made alone. The Battle of Velkarath began at dawn on the 7th day of the Civil War. Marcus had seen larger battles, bloodier battles, more strategically significant battles. But he'd never seen one that mattered more. Lyra commanded from the front, against his protests, against Kethvar's advice, against every tactical principle in the book. She stood on the ridge overlooking the capital, her ceremonial armor catching the light of the twin suns, visible to every soldier on both sides. This is insane, Marcus said, positioning himself between her and the most likely sniper angles. You're making yourself a target. I'm making myself a symbol, Lyra corrected. My people need to see me. They need to know their Empress fights with them, not behind them. You can't fight if you're dead. Then keep me alive, Marcus. That's what you're here for, isn't it? He wanted to argue. The implant wanted him to throw her over his shoulder and carry her to safety. But he knew she was right. Valkyrie culture valued warrior rulers, and Lyra's presence on the battlefield was worth 1,000 tactical advantages. So he stayed at her side, rifle ready, and watched the war unfold below. The loyalist forces struck at dawn, 3 proms driving toward the capital in coordinated assault. Vortan's defenders were prepared. They'd had days to entrench, but Kethvar's veterans fought with a ferocity that defied their numbers. The battle raged through the morning, lines surging back and forth, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then the Vortan reserves emerged from the eastern approach, and the balance tipped. Fall back. Kethvar's voice crackled over the comm. They had troops we didn't account for. Fall back to secondary positions. Marcus watched the loyalist advance crumble, watched soldiers who'd fought for hours begin the grim work of tactical retreat. The gamble had failed. They'd staked everything on a quick victory, and the enemy had more resources than expected. We need to move, he told Lyra. Now, if we can reach the extraction point, no, Lyra, the battle is lost. We have to preserve you for the next. I said no. Her voice was iron. If I run now, there won't be a next fight. My supporters will scatter, the undecided houses will commit to Vortan, and everything we've fought for dies on this field. If you stay, you die on this field. Maybe. She turned to face him, and there was no fear in her eyes. Only certainty. Marcus, I'm going down there. I'm going to rally whatever troops I can and lead a counterattack on the eastern flank. It's probably suicide. You don't have to come. The hell I don't. I'm releasing you from your obligation. Whatever the implant is telling you, Ignore it. Save yourself. Marcus stared at her, this small, fierce woman who'd been a stranger 3 months ago and was now the center of his universe. The implant screamed at him to grab her, drag her to safety, protect her whether she wanted protection or not. He ignored it. Lyra, he said quietly, I told you once that I couldn't tell where the programming ended, and I began. I was wrong. The programming ends where I start choosing. And I choose this. I choose you. Not because they made me, because you're worth choosing. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. You'll probably die. Probably. But I'll die free. That's more than most people get. She reached up, pulled his head down and kissed him. Brief and fierce, a promise and a goodbye wrapped in one. Then let's go die free together, she said. They went down the ridge together, into the smoke and the screaming and the chaos. Marcus moved like he hadn't moved since Proxima, fluid, lethal, every motion precise. Beside him, Lyra fought with the skills he'd taught her and the courage that was entirely her own. The retreating loyalists saw their Empress charging toward the enemy. They saw her human guardian cutting down anyone who got close. They saw two people choosing to die rather than surrender. And they stopped retreating. First by squads, then by companies, the loyalist forces reformed. The retreat became a stand, then a counterattack. Soldiers who'd been ready to flee found something worth fighting for. Not a symbol, not an institution, but a young woman who refused to abandon them. Marcus lost track of time. He took wounds, a slash across his ribs, a bullet graze on his shoulder, something that cracked when a Vortan soldier landed a hit on his side. He kept fighting. Lyra stayed at his back, covering his blind spots, their movements synchronized, in a way that went beyond training. The eastern flank broke first. Then, the center. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, the Vortan forces began a retreat that turned into a rout. Marcus barely noticed. His vision was graying at the edges, blood loss finally catching up with him. He felt himself falling, felt Lyra catch him, heard her shouting for medics in a voice that sounded very far away. Stay with me, she was saying. Marcus, stay with me, that's an order. He tried to laugh. Can't order me. Not programmed for that. Then, I'm asking. Please. Stay. The implant was quiet, probably damaged in the fighting. For the first time since he'd woken up in love, Marcus's head was silent. And in that silence, he realized something. He didn't need it anymore. I'm staying, he managed. Chose to, remember? Then the darkness took him. Marcus woke in a medical bay, 3 days later, to find Lyra asleep in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, one hand resting on his arm as if to reassure herself he was still there. The war was over. He learned later. Vortan had surrendered. The undecided houses had committed to Lyra once word of her battlefield heroics spread. The Empire was united under an Empress who'd earned her throne in blood. But none of that mattered as much as the weight of her hand on his arm. Lyra. Ducked. She jerked awake, amber eyes focusing on him with desperate hope. Marcus, the doctors said, takes more than that to kill me. He tried to sit up, winced, settled back. How bad? 4 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, severe blood loss, and what the surgeons called the most stubborn will to live they'd ever encountered. She smiled, but tears were tracking down her face. They said you should have died. Your heart stopped twice on the table. And the implant? Lyra's expression shifted, complicated, unreadable, damaged beyond repair. The same blow that broke your ribs destroyed the neural interface. The doctors removed what was left during surgery. Marcus absorbed that. The constant hum in his mind, the manufactured emotions, the voice that had guided his feelings for 3 months. All gone. He waited to feel different, to feel the love drain away like water from a broken vessel. It didn't. I thought it would change things, Lyra said quietly, reading his expression. When they told me the implant was destroyed, I feared. That I'd stop loving you? Yes. Marcus reached up, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and touched her face. Lyra, I told you on that battlefield. I chose you. Not the implant. Me. And that choice didn't die when the hardware did. But how can you know? How can either of us know if what you feel is real, or just residual programming? We can't. He smiled, and it hurt, and he didn't care. But that's true of every relationship, isn't it? Nobody can prove their feelings are real. We just choose to believe them, choose to act on them, choose to build something together and hope it lasts. That's very philosophical for a soldier. I've had 3 days of unconsciousness to think about it. Lyra laughed, a real laugh, bright and surprised, and Marcus felt something in his chest that had nothing to do with broken ribs. "I have a proposal," she said. "Now that the war is over, now that you're no longer bound by programming, I'm listening. Stay. Not as a diplomatic symbol or a program protector. Stay as whatever you want to be. My advisor. My trainer. She hesitated, vulnerability flickering across her features. My partner. If you want." Marcus considered it. He could go home, back to Earth, back to the military, back to the life he'd left behind. The peace treaty was signed. His mission was technically over. Nobody would blame him for returning. But Earth didn't have Lyra. "I have a counter-proposal," he said. "I'll stay, but not as anything official. Not as a symbol or a tool or a diplomatic asset. Just as a man who loves a woman and wants to see where that goes. That's scandalous. An empress and a human soldier. You've already broken every tradition in the book. What's one more?" Lyra leaned forward, her forehead touching his. "Is this real, Marcus? Tell me this is real." "It's real. I was programmed to love you. But somewhere along the way, I chose to love you instead. And I'll keep choosing every day for as long as you'll let me." She kissed him then, gentle, careful of his injuries, but full of a warmth that no programming could ever manufacture. Outside the medical bay, the Empire celebrated its new empress. Inside, two people who'd started as puppets in a political game chose, freely and fully, to become something more. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be challenges ahead, cultural barriers, political complications, the slow work of building trust between species that had spent decades killing each other. But they'd face those challenges together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Marcus had been programmed to love the alien empress. He'd chosen to love her instead. And that made all the difference.